Tick tock, coming along. Couple more steps, and then we'll be good. Oops. And what do I need to do? Oh, no, it's already, look at that. It's actually saying the chat's available. Okay, well, I can't quite figure out the system they've got, but it's working, so it's working, and that's what's important. Good morning to everyone, or afternoon as the case may be, or perhaps you may be watching this recorded in the evening. I want to get a couple bookkeeping things out of the way. So we are coming into Yamim Noraim, into the high holiday season, and between Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeret, we are going to be missing some of our Torah classes. For those of you that study Mishnah with me, don't worry, the Wednesday classes will continue. But for our Torah classes, we are going to be on hiatus after today. There will be no class on the 13th as we are leading into Rosh Hashanah, on the 20th between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, on the 27th between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and on the 4th between Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, which means our next scheduled Torah class will be on Wednesday, October 11th. Just make sure everybody's got that. Wednesday, October 11th is when we will resume our lunchtime Torah study class. Mishnah will continue as normal for those of you that study with me in the evenings. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get down to work with what we've got today, which is a big monumental topic from one of the more famous passages here in the tail end of the Torah, which is crammed full of famous passages. So we're going to work off of Nitzavim here. We are in chapter 29, verse number 9 to begin the parasha, and I'll point out a few important things as we go. You stand this day, all of you, before your God Adonai, your tribal heads, your elders, your officials, every householder in Israel. All right, so a couple things to point out here is that this is the final gathering that Moses is beginning as a prelude to his own passing. He will be dying in just a few chapters, and that means he's got a last push that he needs to make an impression on the community. And as you can see, he is doing that by drawing everyone together. One little thing I'd also want to point out, because I've seen a few articles recently and some people discussing this, Sefaria has switched over as the default JPS, Jewish Publication Translation. But you can choose your translation. For those of you who don't know, you click on your verse, you go to translations, and then you can pick whichever translation you want. But the default for readability has been the JPS translation since its creation back in the 80s. And then it was updated in 2006, and Sefaria is now implementing that as a default. But you'll notice little asterisks here and there, and these are from the modern update version, where primarily one of the major things they did that has caused controversy, because people need to argue about something pointlessly, is they have taken words that are in the native Hebrew in biblical times in a state of gender ambiguity, and they have preserved that ambiguity rather than rendering them into one particular gender in the modern parlance. In this particular case, it is the word ish. Ish can, in some contexts, refer specifically to man, meaning a male person, but ish can also refer to a different status of person. Here they're rendering it as householder. Ish does not only apply to people with a certain set of reproductive organs. And that'll be your last warning, because we are going to be talking a little bit about reproductive organs in some fairly frank and biological terms. That's not the focus of today's lesson, but for those of you that are uncomfortable with your children hearing things like that, if you ever watch or listen to my studies with children, check it out first. Personally, there's nothing here that they shouldn't know. It's basic biology, but I know some people can be sensitive, like some people are about changing a translation from man or min into the word householder. I've read a couple articles where people were fuming that JPS would dare to change the Hebrew. You'll note the Hebrew has not changed, only the rendering into English. And if you read through the commentary, which again will point out how you can find quite easily, if you go to translations, here at the top, it'll tell you your current translation, and there happens to be some explanatory notes right up at the top. If you read through those notes, I think you'll find them quite compelling of why they made the changes that they made. In any event, we always must remember that every translation is an attempt to render the infinite complexity of the Torah into a finite rendering of English, and there was always going to be a lot left on the cutting room floor. That's one of the reasons why we have to study, is in order to recapture not only the things that were left out of the translation, because no translation can ever capture the infinite nuance of the original Hebrew, just as the original Hebrew can barely capture the infinite nuance of God, but because even if you are fluent in Hebrew in a biblical form, you are still going to need additional assistance in capturing every nuance of an infinite God. With that in mind, let's go on. So not only is this Ish person gathered along with the high-powered folks, but verse 10, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from woodchopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant of your God Adonai, which your God Adonai is concluding with you this day with its sanctions. So it is made even more apparent in verse 10 that this gathering is for everyone, that this is not exclusive at all, that every single person in the entire community is being brought together, whether they are all currently a formal member of the covenant, whether they are a stranger within the camp, which usually is referring to somebody that is a non-permanent resident, whether they are from the upper echelons of the leaders of the tribes, or whether they are in the most basic of jobs, as very low on the social totem pole, the wood chopper and water drawer. So all of these people are called together. The Torah is not for any one gender. The Torah is not for any one economic strata. The Torah is not for any one subsection of the nation. And this will reestablish that whole covenant. And verse 12, that is in order to establish you this day as God's people, and in order to be your God as promised you and as sworn to your fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So very powerful statement, very reminiscent of the whole idea of I took you out of the land of Egypt to be your God, very reminiscent of God talking to Moses at the burning bush, that he was fulfilling the promise sworn to the patriarchs. This is a great restatement and recommitment, almost a renewal of vows, if you will, to use a modern term, for the people of Israel to be re-inducted in the covenant, to re-embrace the covenant as they are about to say goodbye to Moses, who had been their conductor during this covenant experience, and who was being replaced, which is a bit shaky. And he is trying to make sure that they are pointed towards God, as Judaism is not on his shoulders, it is on God's shoulders. So that with him gone, Judaism can still continue, because after all, God still continues. Now, verse 13, we expand our definition of who is being included in this covenant quite radically. I make this covenant with you, this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but both with those who are standing here with us this day before Adonai our God, and with those who are not with us here this day. Well, you know that we dwelt in the land of Egypt, that we passed through the midst of various other nations, and you have seen the detestable things and fetishes of wood and stone and silver, gold that they keep, meaning their idols. Perchance there is among you some man or woman or some clan or tribe whose heart is even now turning away from Adonai our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. Perchance there is among you a stock sprouting poison, weed, and wormwood. When hearing these words of these sanctions, they may imagine a special immunity, thinking, I shall be safe, though I follow my own willful heart, to the utter ruin of moist and dry alike, meaning that it's not only going to affect me, it will harm the whole community. All right, we're not going to go any further, but I wanted to show you in context, in the Peshat, this whole introductory phrase, all of the from the water drawer to the prince, everyone in the community, from those standing here or those not standing here, that in context, this is pointing at the obligation to avoid idolatry. That you may think, as long as the nation has a temple for God, then I can still keep my little statue of an Egyptian, Moabite, Canaanite deity. And, it's what? It's one person. I mean, do you really think the covenant applies to Plony the water drawer? I mean, it's only for the fancy people. As indeed we know in many of the ancient faiths, there was a particular layer to the religion that was the focus of the dominant social class, whether that be political, economic, social, whatever it might be. And the lower classes did not always have the same buy-in, or definitely not the same access. God is trying to tell us, no, this religion, Judaism, is for everyone. And God could not make that clearer, that it extends from the fanciest fancy prince who's going to be doing all sorts of amazing things up in his palace someday, all the way down to the guy that's just pulling water out of the well. Judaism is equally available and equally incumbent upon them, that there is not a higher obligation to maintain a connection to God if you are the prince than if you are the peasant. Judaism does not recognize those as being religiously relevant categories, even if it does acknowledge, while not approving, of the social hierarchies that humans create. It definitely does not want those to be mapped onto the Jewish world, where such hierarchies have no place. All right, so in context, as we would call it, the pshat, the surface reading within its text, that seems to be the focus. However, verse 14 is one of those verses that, as many of our classic commentators might say, is calling out darsheni, drash me, explain me in more detail. Those who are standing here with us this day before Adonai our God, and those who are not with us here this day, sounds odd. Now, in Peshat, it's simply meaning that this covenant is not only binding upon the people who are standing there saying, Amen, I so solemnly swear, that this covenant is binding upon the entire people Israel, past, present, future. There's no expiration date. This is a perpetual obligation. However, there is more to it than that in the eyes of our sages, that it is not simply saying the covenant is a perpetual covenant, as opposed to a temporary contract, not just saying that it is a covenant that can be inherited and passed on generation to generation, that can be expanded to those who join later on, who convert into Judaism. It is saying all of that, but not only that. There's more going on with this phrase that, from a spiritual point of view, we need to unpack. So let's unpack it, or at least let's scratch the surface. Before I do so, sorry, I always give a chance if anybody wants to fire away in chat or in Zoom. Let me know if you have a question. I'm not seeing anything immediately. I will check back from time to time between my screens. Let's go ahead and dive in. Oh, and I'm on the wrong part. There we are. All right, so we're going to begin. Both of these are taken from Midrash Tanhuma. Tanhuma was a anthological midrash work that put together many of the midrashim from earlier levels, some of which were expanded or reworked, some of which were combined into more extensive retelling, linking things together. But it is a classic midrashic work. So what do they take from these words? Well, to get there, we're going to have to take a little bit of a long route. Just as a little aside, for those of you that have not studied much Midrash, remember that Midrash believes that all of the Torah is laid out in front of us as though words on cards. So just imagine a card for every word, and the entire Torah is laid out simultaneously in front of us. And that means that you can put your finger on one word, and you can put your other finger on another word, and there will be linkages between them, imaginary strings that help one phrase apply to a different phrase. And then when you add in the layer of Tanakh, the rest of the Bible, then the layer of understanding gets even deeper. Now, oftentimes this will be a fairly mundane practice of simply trying to use one word from one section to simply explain what the word in another section means, which is incredibly useful and a reminder of the cohesiveness of the project. But other times it will be more elaborate. Oftentimes there will be a greater stretch of what the words might be hinting at by looking at these relationships between them. It's not for us to say that it is too much of a stretch or an easy stretch. Different people will find it more or less resonating. And indeed, different rabbis had different midrashim that didn't always agree with each other. So that is perfectly fine. But for the moment, try to recognize the poetry that the sages are recognizing within the connection, the overflow of these different verses. Introduction done, let's get down to work. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God. All right, back in Exodus 20, verse 1, also known as the Aseret HaDibrot, or in English, the 10 Commandments. This is commandment number 1. I am the Lord your God. Rabbi Isaac said, all the prophets received the inspiration for their future prophecies at Mount Sinai. All right, what? That seems rather strange. So it seems to be what he's saying is that Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all of the later prophets, that their actual prophecy was somehow received at Mount Sinai, which is anachronistic, to say the least. I mean, we're talking 1,000 years difference here for some of them. How does that work? How do we know this to be so? Well, what's my proof? It is written, but with him that stands here with us this day before the Lord our God, and also with him that is not here with us this day, our verse from 29:14. All right, like I told you, they're going to use this verse to tell us more than just the covenant is eternal. How does that prove that all prophets received inspiration from that moment at Sinai? Well, that stands, meaning that part of the quote, here with us this day, refers to those who were already born. And with him that is not here alludes to those who were to be born in the future. All right, so far that seems fairly pashat even. Maybe we weren't just talking about the geographical location of Israelites at the time, but as I already mentioned, we could be talking about this generation, next generation, and onward. All of us are bound by the same covenant. In the Deuteronomy 29 quote, that seems perfectly reasonable, that they're all bound by the responsibility, in particular there, not to be idolaters. However, but when you combine it with verse 1 of chapter 20 of Exodus, what are we saying? Well, then we are saying that there was a spiritual experience even for those that weren't standing at Mount Sinai physically at the time. That even for those not born at the time of Mount Sinai, meaning everybody who wasn't there during the Exodus, that they too were part of that experience. Hence, they were not with us this day, right? They're not born. Now, what does that mean? How do we get it from that more clearly? Well, not standing here with us this day is not written. We go back to 29:14. It says, and also with him that is not here with us this day. Now, if we were going to be very strict in our poetic parallelism, since the first half of the verse says, with him that stands here with us, the second half should say, and with him that doesn't stand here with us. The word stand should be mirrored in the first half and second half of the verse. It's not there in the second half of the verse. Why not? Well, rather it is written, is not here with us this day, with no standing verb included at all. And this alludes then to the souls who were to be created in the future, since standing here could not be said of them. And if we were going to be talking only about geography, then, I'm standing here and you're standing over there, that kind of, location phrasing, then the second half should have said standing. The fact that it deliberately omitted standing when the parallelism would have suggested it implies that standing would have been incorrect in application to at least some of the people that were meant to be included by this very all-inclusive phrasing that we find at the beginning of Nitzavim. Well, for whom would standing not be applicable? I mean, because, anybody that was alive at the time would be standing somewhere. So, standing here, standing there, it applies to the whole world. So the only group of people that standing wouldn't apply to would be the people that did not yet exist. So by removing standing, the Torah is hinting that this is being addressed not only to the people that are born and walking around at the time of Moses's conversation, but that this is also talking about those who are not yet born. Hopefully you're following the logic. I always find that one of the most challenging parts of the rabbi's midrash is that they wrote too little, which is why I'll read a sentence and then talk for 5 minutes. If they had just written more of the connective phrasings, laying out and explaining exactly what they were doing and meaning by the word choice and the emphases that they were pointing out, I think more people would have found their writings more compelling to the modern palate. The modern palate is used to having every part of the idea laid out by the author, whereas the ancients, not only Judaism, but many ancient cultures, expected the reader to actually be trying to think it out, because, writing was something you tried to keep short because it was hard to write, both with inscriptions and even later with paper and pen, because it was all manual. We didn't have little keyboards that we could just let our fingers fly across and write out, hundreds and hundreds of words a minute. So they tried to be condensed, and they expected the reader to pick up the slack. So you do your part and I'll do my part to help you. All right, so onward from this, however, we can see then that these people who were not born yet, they were included in this general statement. And that is why, to get another addition of another piece of evidence, that is why the verse states here in Malachi, in the book of Malachi's prophecy, the burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. Again, it does not say of Malachi, from Malachi. It says by Malachi. Now, unfortunately, in English, this is a little ambiguous because by Malachi still sounds like the English phrase, like, by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes was written by him, that it was his invention. But in the actual text of Malachi, it's biyad, through the hands of, by means of, through the agency of, might be a more wordy, but maybe clearer English way of rendering it. So there it means that it wasn't his idea, but it merely came by means of Malachi, indicating that the prophecy had been transmitted to him previously at Sinai. So how would you say that it wasn't his prophecy? Well, because you would say that the prophecy that he was giving at that moment wasn't from him, it was from Sinai. He just happens to be the conduit for this variation to be released into the world, that it is all from Sinai. Indeed, he was at Sinai. If you're not convinced, let's try Isaiah. Come you near to me, hear you this. From the beginning I have not spoken in secret. From the time that it was, there I am. And now the Lord has sent me and his spirit. And the Midrash explains, Isaiah is saying here that at the time the Torah was given, I received the prophecy. Hence it says, from the time that the Torah was, there I am. And now the Lord, and now the Lord God has sent me and his spirit. But until now, he did not give me permission to prophesy. Okay, so what is this interpretation of the words of Isaiah trying to reinforce? Is that Isaiah already had the prophecy. Isaiah already had in his soul what needed to be said, because it had been put into his soul at the time of Sinai, and it was just waiting for the clock to go ting, and then he could actually speak it into the world. That is this idea that the Midrash is trying to give us. Everyone was there at Sinai, meaning every prophecy was received all at the same time, and from our linear point of view in time, each one was scheduled to be released at a certain time, but it was all there. To use a modern example, it would be like having a playlist before you go on your road trip, let's say the old days, right? You actually have a cassette player. Before you go on your road trip, you copy a bunch of your favorite songs onto the cassette, and you do it in a particular order, but you copy them all onto that tape on the same day. You make your tape at the same time. That tape now contains everything you want to be listening to or sharing with your passengers during the trip. But the passengers don't hear it all at once. They hear it in the particular order that you happen to lay it out on the tape, even though all of those songs were originally created, put into the tape at the same time. It's an imperfect analogy. We could do other technology if you want, but hopefully you get the basic idea that it's all there. It's just being played at a certain time, but it was all created at the same time. We're going to come back on this topic. So if you're still confused or have questions, that's fine. Fire them away into the chat. But we will come back to this topic because there's much more to be said about it. Now, not only the prophets, but also the wise men who were there and those who were destined to come received their inspiration at Sinai. As it is said, these words the Lord spoke unto all your assembly with a great voice, and it went no more. What is meant by a great voice and it went no more? Our sages said, the entire 10 Commandments came forth from the mouth of the Mighty One in sound. This was an extremely difficult procedure. No ordinary individual is able to speak in that fashion, nor is any human ear able to endure such a sound. Therefore it is written, my soul failed me when he spoke, from Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. With a great voice, and it went out no more. The voice divided itself into 7 different sounds, and then turned into 70 different languages. So the Midrash is finishing with this almost mystical understanding that when God spoke, it was not something that would only be heard by the prophets, which heard things from God that the rest of us could not. It was something that could be heard by everyone, and not only heard by everyone, but understood by everyone. The rabbis had an archetypical number of 70 languages to describe the vast array of human expression of all the different languages of the world, and they are basically saying the Torah was given in a way, these Aseret HaDibrot, this special theophany of God speaking to us, was something that was rendered in perfect clarity in all forms of human expression. Would that we could recapture that, but we are not God. The best we can do is try to recover as much of that clarity as possible. All right. Now, let me just hold on a second before I move on. Let me just double check. Nope, nothing into the chat. Let's grab a quick sip of tea. The next part gets a little more esoteric, a little more mystical, if you will. Although, as I often try to explain, the rabbis of old did not divide the world into mystical and non-mystical, and in the same really uncomfortable way that is done in the modern world. And what they are saying here, they believe to be a perfectly reasonable explanation and metaphor that should help us understand our place in the world. And as we are coming up to the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are right around the corner, that is the spirit in which it should be taken. Rabbi Yochanan asked, why is it written, who does great things past finding, marvelous things without number? Taken from the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 10. Now, you might think that that's just, a bit of PR text. Wow, God's amazing. Well, let's explain what kind of amazingness we think is actually going on here. You should know that every soul, from Adam to the end of the world, was formed during the 6 days of creation, and that all of them were present in the Garden of Eden and at the time of the giving of the Torah. As it is said, with him that stands here with us this day, and also with him that is not here with us this day. Our verse from Deuteronomy 29. So Rabbi Yochanan says this verse is actually explaining part of God's greatness, which is that God created all of the souls that would ever exist for all of creation during creation. That, whoever is randomly listening to this at this moment, your soul was founded at that same moment that the first soul was founded for Adam, for the first human being. That all of our souls that would ever exist were all made during creation. We are not a an afterthought. We are not an accident. We are all woven into the very fabric of creation from its beginning. And as such, as our souls would have been in existence throughout that period of time until today, our souls also would have been present, not only in the Garden of Eden, of course, but also at the giving of Torah. Now, the Garden of Eden, of course, is a reference not only to the bliss that we enjoyed at the time, but also, more importantly, giving a hint that all of us are like Adam and Chava, in the sense that all of us reached out to grab the fruit and to experience the knowledge of good and evil. And all of us were there to experience the correctiveness of instructions given with the giving of Torah. So, what is the meaning then of great things past finding out? How do we then put these all together? It refers to the great deeds the Holy One, blessed be He, did in the formation of the embryo. At a time that a man is about to have intercourse with his wife, the Holy One, blessed be He, informs the angel in charge of conception. Know that on this night a person will be formed in the semen of a certain individual known to you. Guard this drop of semen. Take it in the palm of your hand and sow it on the threshing floor in 365 parts, one for each day of the year. And she, the angel, would do so. So we'll pause there for a second because I'm sure that this is a little confusing. So the rabbis often try to use the understanding of the angelic realm in a very anthropomorphic way to help us understand some of the more challenging philosophical, theological, emotional concepts that are embedded within our understanding of reality as guided by Judaism. So one of them is our place as both a soul and a physical creature, and how that works together, and also kind of which came first. Now, here the idea is that the souls have been sort of sitting around in the cosmic waiting room, and that at the time when somebody is about to be conceived, somebody that will actually be born, they are the soul is prepared, if you will. But before the soul can be prepared, the semen has to be prepared. That is to say, the physical form into which the soul will be imbued has to be prepared. A little aside, I've mentioned this in some of my other classes, but I can never tell who's watching at any given time. The rabbis, like most of the ancient world, believed that the main set of instructions and form for the person was in the semen. They did not understand the idea of the two genetic components being brought together by egg and sperm to form a complete set of DNA that would then create the instructions to design the rest of the human as it was gestating. They believed that all of that, indeed, a tiny person, more or less itself, was already formed in the semen, and that it was going to be implanted into the womb and grown there and built of the materials of the mother, of course, but that the basic thing was already ready. The basic person thing. It's hard to call it an embryo, but it kind of works for the modern sense. But that there was a tiny miniature, smaller than the drop of a pin of a head, a pin of a needle, person just waiting to be implanted. So that drop is smashed apart, meaning it is unfurled, if you will, laid out into 365 parts, meaning one for each day of the year, meaning for the totality of a life, and the angel would prepare it in such a way. She then took it in her hand and brought it at once to him, meaning to God, who had said, "It has been already." Now, this is a term from Ecclesiastes. This is the more famous section of this is "There is nothing new under the sun," meaning that this is the same as it has always been. And of course, that what is about to take place is going to include an element that is not new, meaning the human soul. And said to him, "I have done all that you have commanded. Here is the drop. What have you decreed concerning it?" All right, so here is the physical vessel that is going to be the human's vehicle for the soul in life. What is your plan? I've got it all laid out here for you, broken into all of its constituent pieces. The Holy One, blessed be he, forthwith decreed concerning the semen what its end would be, meaning when it would die, whether male or female, weak or strong, poor or rich, short or tall, ugly or handsome, heavy or thin, humble or haughty. He decreed concerning everything that would happen to it, except whether it would be righteous or wicked. That choice alone he left to the individual, as it is said, see, I have set before you this day life and good and death and evil. All right. Very, very important interpretation here, that we are born with certain physical predispositions, some of them including whether we are going to be tall, whether we are going to be short, the physical construction of our body, and some of our elements of our temperament. Some people are likely to be humble, some people are likely to be haughty as a physical feature. Our brain chemistry is massively influenced by both the physicalness of our brain as well as the rest of our body. These are things that are individually determined by our physical makeup. But whether we are going to be righteous or wicked, that is not a decision for the physical body. That is a decision for the soul. That is a decision for that part of us that is transcendent, the part of us that was in the Garden of Eden, that was witnessing the giving of Torah. That part gets to make the decision of whether we go left or right, whether we go right or wrong. It's very much like the metaphor of somebody driving a car. Your car is going to dictate, whether it is comfortable, whether it is uncomfortable, whether your air conditioning is working or not. Yes, the physicalness of your vehicle will have an impact, but you still have the choice to go left or right, to go right, to be correct or to be wrong, to be righteous or wicked. And that is up to us regardless of the vehicle that we have been assigned in this physical process. The Holy One, blessed be he, would summon the angel in charge of souls, right? So we had the one that was in charge of the conception and the semen. Now we've got the souls, and say, bring me a certain soul which is in the Garden of Eden, whose name is so-and-so and whose form is such and such. All the souls that would exist in the future were fashioned with the first man, and they will exist to the end of the world. All of them were created on the sixth day of creation, as we already hinted at. They were designated to be the descendants of Adam, as it is said, whoever comes into being, the name thereof was given long ago. Again, taken from Kohelet, from the book of Ecclesiastes. All right, so we've got the physical code laid out for what the human will be. It's like, one of those Iron Man diagrams where all of the different pieces of the suit have been expanded out, so we can see every little detail of the physical vessel that the soul is going to inhabit. And now go get the pilot. Bring them from the waiting room, sitting in Gan Eden, and bring them here. The angel departed to bring the soul to the Holy One, blessed be he. When the soul was brought in, it prostrated itself before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. At that time, the Holy One, blessed be he, says to the soul, enter the semen that is in this one's hand. Okay, so the soul is coming, and of course it is bowing in the presence of God, and God is saying, all right, here's your vehicle, in you go. You're about to enter the world. The soul opens its mouth and cries out, Master of the universe, I have always been satisfied with the place in which I have dwelt from the day you created me. Why do you desire that I enter this putrid drop? Now I am holy and pure, but then I will be cut off from the place of your glory. All right, the soul asks a very good question. God, I'm happy here, right? Gan Eden is very nice. And right now I am holy and I am pure because there is no opportunity for me to deviate from what is right in this realm. So can't I just stay? And just be here forever? This is wrestling with the question that our sages, and hopefully all of us have had at some point, of, well, what's the purpose of actually giving the soul a physical life? Why not just make us as our final form, which is just a soul. And the rabbis here are trying to explain that, well, yes, God could very well have made all the souls at the beginning of creation, and they could all be lounging around by the pool of Gan Eden, sunning themselves in the glory of God, and everything is wonderful, and the soul's perfect form of existence. It feels. But God is going to tell us that that's not actually the point of creation. Thereupon the Holy One, blessed be he, replied, "The place which you are to enter is better for you than where you have dwelt. From the moment I created you, it was only for this drop of semen." Then the Holy One, blessed be he, forced him to enter there, though against his will. All right, God is saying, yeah, I know that right now your soul is at ease and you are at comfort here in this Gan Eden type realm, but I only made the world, and I only made you, the soul, so that one day you would be in the world as a physical creature. And yeah, it's going to have a lot of problems. There's going to be all the various trouble that comes with being a physical creature. You're going to have colds, you're going to break a bone, you're going to stub your toe, step on Legos, all that fun stuff. And you are going to go through all of the emotional trauma that comes from being cut off from the clarity of purpose and knowledge. So you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have regrets, you're going to have difficulty relating to other people and even relating to God, and you are going to make transgressions because the path before you will not feel clear and straight. You're right. All of that is going to feel worse than what this feels like now. But I made the world so you would have those experiences. I made the world so you would be choosing between righteous and wicked. That was the point. And I didn't make the souls just to have souls lounging around the pool at the vacation home. God could make as many angels as God wanted. God did not want more angels, more non-material beings that just simply existed within the realm of God's glory without any actual, actuation, without any change, without any direction. For that, they need to go into the drop. They need to climb into the suit and button up and get down in the world and do the job that they need to do there. That is where the magic happens. This life is where we are able to accomplish things that angels can't, and which the soul is poorer for if it doesn't experience. That it is for the soul's benefit to journey through this world. Yes, I know many people consider this world to be nothing but a veil of woe and all of the other negative stereotypes that have been lambasted by some within our own tradition, but mostly from other cultures. Judaism doesn't. Judaism says this world is where the soul goes to do what it needs to do. Without this world, there would be no purpose to our existence at all. Our souls would have no reason to exist. Without this body, what would be the point? Okay, so we are forced into this world against our will. And then we are forced, the Midrash continues, but I had to delete for time, through the gestation period. And it's quite comfy there in the womb, just eating with room service, as it will. And then it gets forced out of there as well. And then it has to live. And yeah, life comes with all the challenges I already mentioned, and then some. Finally, though, as his end draws near, as it comes time for a person to die, the angel comes to him and asks, "Do you not recognize me?" Remember, I was there at the beginning. And he answers, "Yes, but why do you come to me on this day?" The angel replies, "To take you from this world. The time of your departure has come." He begins to cry out immediately, the human, and his voice can be heard from one end of the earth to the other, but no one recognizes or heeds his voice except a crowing cock. So the rooster crows in a response to the cry of a soul that is about to leave this world. And he says to the angel, "Have you not already taken me out of two worlds and brought me into this one?" The first being taken from Gan Eden, the second being from the womb into this world. "Why are you taking me from this world? Right? You've already forced me to leave two places. Now you're going to force me to leave a third." But note that shows the transformation of what the soul has undergone. The soul has learned that this world is indeed better for it, that it may be a place with stubbed toes and with heartache and grief, but it is a place where the soul experiences things, grows, develops, is transformed, that it could not accomplish in Gan Eden, in the realm before its physical existence. And it definitely couldn't accomplish it while, gestating within the womb. The soul has become attached to this world. And that's not a terrible thing. Yes, the soul does need to release, and that will happen, but the soul has realized that its place here is important. And those connections that it's made to each other, to other people, to its own mission, those are to be cherished. They can't be preserved eternally because we are physical creatures and we do wear out, but they are to be recognized and honored. And the soul is beginning to make that transition. And the angel tries to explain. The angel responds, "Did I not tell you that you were formed against your will, that you were born against your will, that you will live against your will, and that ultimately you will have to render an accounting before the Holy One, blessed be He, against your will?" That yes, you didn't exactly sign up for this. I get that, but you were created for this purpose. God created souls so that they could come into this world, that they could come through the miracle of birth into a life where they would struggle. And no matter how comfortable your existence may be, and most of us have more comfortable existences than almost anyone ever in the human history, but even still, we struggle, whether it be physically, whether it be emotionally, whether it be socially, we all struggle. We have to work against our will because life does not just give us what we want. We have to bang and fight and transform it for ourselves and for others. And then one day, we will lay down those tools, and we will leave this world and go back to the King. We will go back to Adonai, and then God will ask us to give an accounting for what we did. Were we righteous or were we wicked? When we were on this journey, when we were buttoned up in this superhero suit that gives us the amazing power of being able to move a soul through the physical world in a way that allows it to be transformed and ennobled, did we use it to its full potential? Did we make the changes in our own self that were needed? Did we make the impact on the world around us that was needed? Did we choose to do what was right? Did we choose to do what was wrong? That no, we were not given full control over the existence that we would have. But the existence we were given was still ours to control greatly by choosing to do what was right or wrong. As we are now getting into high holidays, the month of Elul is almost over. Hopefully you've already used some of it, but intensify it for the last few days. And ask yourself, I was given the superpower of being a soul in the world. Have I been using that power correctly? When I return to the next world, will I be able to give a good accounting? Will I be able to stand before the judge and say, yes, I did what I could. I did what I should. I did all that I was capable of and lived a righteous life to the best of my ability. You, God, created me, and I lived up to that purpose. And now I will accept the judgment that you have on me. That's what we're asked to try and recall, that we are not just a putrid drop, and we are not just a soul that is unchanging and just going to bask in God's glory, that we are this strange mixture of the two, that we are a blend, and that we will allow our souls to be transformed in this world for good, and that we will do all we can to avoid what is bad, and to avoid what is bad for others as well. With that, I will leave you for today. As always, I'm always willing to carry on the conversation privately if others have more questions. This is certainly not an easy text, but then I don't like giving you easy texts. If all you do is study what is easy, then you'll never understand what you're truly capable of. Take care, everyone. And a reminder again, we will not be having class until October 11th for our Torah class. Mishnah will continue. Torah class will not resume until October 11th when we have Bereshit, something new to study, and no more holidays to continue to draw our attention elsewhere. Be well, Shana Tova.